Don't you just love orchids? Because here you are at our absolutely fantastic orchid display with one of the world's most unbelievable orchids. It hangs upside down. And I've got one of our experts here today. Dr. Eager, you love flowers, don't you?
I love flowers.
Okay, tell us what this orchid is, please.
This orchid is called Stanhopea. It was named after a Lord Stanhope.
I guess that makes sense. They always add the E or the IE or something like that at the end of these to sort of Latinise the names, don't
right,
they?
yes.
But what is unique about this orchid?
Well, it has many unique features. You've mentioned one, it flowers on its roots.
Because most of the others hang on the other side, don't they?
That's right. Most plants have flowers on their stems. I think this plant is good evidence that God has a sense of humour.
Well, he certainly does.
But it is really clever as well. Now, you smelt this flower this morning. It has a strong, sweet fragrance, and that's how it attracts insects. We know that flowers attract insects.
But what sort of insects, Diane, does this flower attract?
Well, it attracts a type of bee, and the bee is attracted by that strong fragrance, which comes from a fragrant oil. And that's what the bee is after, not nectar, fragrant oil, and it has little brushes on its legs, and it just loves to collect this fragrant oil. But you smell
But it doesn't collect pollen.
No, well, it has pollen, but it doesn't make nectar. But the interesting thing is the bee has to fly into the middle of the flower to get this fragrant oil, but that's a long way.
So it's actually coming up from the bottom.
It comes up from the bottom, lands in the middle of the flower, but that's a long way from where the pollen is. You can see the pollen, it's right on the ends of those little columns that curve over the top of it.
So somewhere down in here is where the
Right
pollen
on the
is,
very end, you can see a little knob there. That's its. Now, how's the bee going to get to the pollen? Well, the plant actually makes it in an interesting way. This fragrant oil is so overpowering that the bee just sort of goes, ah.
You mean it swoons?
It swoons and its legs collapse underneath it. And because of the way the flower is shaped, when that happens to the bee is facing backwards. It just falls down straight through the gap, past the end of that column, and the flower glues its pollen onto the back of the bee. Now, fortunately, the bee wakes up before it hits the ground.
You mean this flower actually needs gravity to get pollinated?
It does indeed, yes. Yeah, this flower knows its physics. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
This plant is definitely sensed that God is both clever and has a wonderful sense of humour and has given us this brilliant gift of his evidence in design.
So this bee falls down but doesn't hit the ground, doesn't kill itself, wakes up, and then what does it do?
Well, it has to fly away because it's only done half its job. The idea of a bee collecting pollen is that it collects it from one flower and has to take it to another plant. So it's only done half the job when it's fallen out of that
Hey, stop.
flower.
There's just one thing I'm going to ask you here. How does the bee, when it's falling down, it's lost control of its back legs, it's swooning and think, this is beautiful, this is magnificent, this is sexy, this is all those things, right? But you said it collects pollen on the way down, but the thing's nearly unconscious. It hits that little thing, but where does the pollen end up on this bee?
It ends up stuck on its back, and the interesting thing is the middle of the back is the one place that a bee cannot reach in order to scratch something off. Bees groom themselves to keep their little furry outsides clean, and we know that they do that. We've actually watched them, but there is one spot on the middle of their back where they can't reach. So the pollen is in just that right spot, so that when it flies away to another flower, it's still loaded with pollen.
I'll tell you what, Diane, before we go any further, have you ever been bee shooting?
No, I've never been bee shooting.
You've never tried to shoot a bee in the middle of the back?
No.
In fact, this is
I don't think I'd be very good at that.
This is an incredible pollen gun, isn't it? Because it never misses.
No, it never misses.
And so we've only discussed half the job today, and they can come to Jurassic Ark, our outdoor museum here in Australia, and they can learn more at our beautiful displays. In fact, they can go to creationresearch.net, find where we are, just a couple of hours north of Brisbane Airport. You'd recommend they come?
Oh, definitely. We have wonderful plants for them.
Oh, you're a flower lover, aren't you?
I'm a plant lover, a flower lover, but we have wonderful plants that are really clever in design and beautiful. Look at some of them.
Yeah, and I tell you what, I'm Mr. Fossil Man, I'm the creation guy, and we even have fossil orchids. And do you know how we know they're a fossil orchid? They just look like dead orchids, because orchids have done exactly what God said, produce their own kind, and today you learn one little bit of a mechanism by which this wonderful Stanhopea orchid orchid does exactly what God said. Come and join us at the Aussie Creation Museum.